guys, welcome back. This week I am going to be tackling the tall chest of drawers that was matching to the lower, longer dresser that I refinished maybe about a month ago or so. This one has been claimed by a client. She's really excited about the outcome. I think that I'm going to start off by stripping and sanding down the majority of this piece. At the very least, the drawers and the top. I'm not sure if she knows exactly the direction that she wants to go with this piece yet, but I do know she wants to have some of the wood elements left in it. We might also switch out the hardware with something different. Again, she's not quite sure yet. She's a little bit on the fence on what direction we're gonna go, but follow along and let's see how this piece turns out in the end. There are some areas of wear and a little bit of distress on this piece just from being used over the decades. You can see some of the finishes coming off in some areas, but overall, it's in fantastic condition as far as the veneer goes. So it should be a pretty straightforward stripping, sanding, restaining. I've already done several pieces in this set before, so I know that it's really pretty underneath. Before I get started on the stripping process, I am going to go ahead and label all of these drawers. They're bound to get mixed up in the meantime. They do all have their very own spot that they like to go in. It's just a lot less of a hassle to have to try to figure out which one goes where while you're trying to put it back together. While I'm at it, I'm also going to remove all that hardware. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that my client wants to try to use this original hardware. It's all going to depend on how it cleans up, so I will still save them. I'm going to start off with a chemical stripper. Since I've worked with this blonde finish before, I do know that it is pretty thick and it almost reacts more like a paint than it does a traditional stained finish or a lacquer. It just has a lot of that white pigment underneath that yellow tone. And so using something a little bit more heavy duty will help me to remove those coats of finish that this manufacturer put on to try to build up the look that they were looking to achieve. Just like every time I strip something, it's messy. I always like to have a disposable container that I can put the residual product in that I'm scraping off, just to try to contain the mess as much as possible. And a little trick, make sure if you are using a metal scraper that it is as straight as possible and does not have any flaws. The last thing you want to do is to gouge or scratch the surface that you're trying to scrape up. Whatever scraper you do use, just make sure it's nice and flat and sharp, and it will make your life a whole lot easier. These two detailed drawers were a little tricky to strip, but with a combination of my flat scraper as well as some fine grade steel wool, I was able to get that finish off. Every time I do use this chemical stripper, I like to also use a afterwash. Acetone also works pretty well for this, but what this will do is loosen up the rest of that stuck on finish, as well as neutralize that stripper. It's a lot looser of a material, so it's a lot easier to buff in with steel wool and wipe back with a paper towel afterwards to get a lot of that product off. After all that scraping and wiping back of the old finish, I am going to go in with my orbital sander as well as my detail sander and smooth over all of those previously stripped surfaces. I am using a 120 grit sandpaper here. I don't want something too abrasive, so I want to stick somewhere between the 100 and 200 grit. There are a couple really small repairs that needed to be made in the veneer. I am just picking a walnut toned color of wood filler, filling those areas in, and I will smooth sand those afterwards. My detail sander doesn't fit perfectly in these areas on these two top drawers. However, with it having that straight edge, it's a lot easier to use and manipulate around these drawers rather than my orbital sander. But like always, I am going to have to do quite a bit of hand sanding. All of these little grooved areas, all of the small contours, all need to be hand sanded and really smoothed out. There are several different tools that I use. You can see right here I'm using a plastic card scraper, and this really helps me to have some rigidity in my sandpaper. But when it comes to those curved areas, sometimes your finger works the best. These dresser drawers did have a lot of grooves in them, and I am just taking a metal pick and really cleaning out all of that gunk, leftover finish, and stripping residue from that so that my stain applies properly. And then I'm back to sanding. I really want to make sure that I have a really smooth surface for all of my stain to be applied evenly. I want to make sure there's no sanding swirls. I'm going to go very carefully and slowly over all of it. You have to be very gentle with the veneer while still maintaining a very smooth, even sand across all of the surfaces. Sometimes if you don't sand something evenly, your stain might not apply evenly. So I really want to take my time and focus on getting a really even finish across the top. It might look like I'm going pretty fast here, but this video is actually sped up 300 times the normal speed. It's at this point that I'm going to go in now and very thoroughly clean all of the areas that I have not stripped and sanded. This might seem like I'm doing things a little out of order. Typically, I would start with cleaning the surfaces. However, since I was planning on using a chemical stripper, I don't necessarily need to clean the oils and polishes off of those stripped surfaces because that chemical stripper will eat through all of that, no problem. So after I'm done all of my messy and dusty sanding, this is a great opportunity to go in and clean all the inside of the drawer cavity, as well as clean all of the areas that I do plan on painting. I'm going to be applying a paint wash before I apply an oil-based stain. This is a water-based paint wash. I'm using a tan with a little bit of green mixed in to counteract some of those red tones, and a lot of water. I really don't have a specific measurement for this type of mixture. I just eyeball it, and I want something really, really runny. The runnier it is, the easier it will be to work with. I'm going to spray a coat of water down, acting as almost like a slip coat so that my paint wash goes on smoothly, does not soak in too quickly to that raw wood grain, and doesn't dry too fast either. I'm going to make sure to brush on a very liberal amount, going all in the same direction, and then wipe it back immediately with paper towels or a clean rag. The key here is to wipe and wipe and wipe and make sure that you don't have a whole lot of leftover paint wash residue on the surfaces, and go in the same direction as the wood grain. That way, if there are any streaks that come through in the end, they're all being camouflaged by the wood grain and it looks natural. I do work in smaller sections, so one drawer face at a time and one section of the dresser at a time. This does tend to dry pretty quickly, so I have to work fast and in smaller sections. The stain look that I am looking to achieve for my client is actually a darker stain. I just know that by applying this paint wash first, it will neutralize some of those red undertones in this veneer, as well as let that really dark, rich stain lay down a little bit more evenly. I have found in the past that really deep, rich stains can sometimes benefit from having a paint wash first. It just allows less of that really dark stain to penetrate and soak into the wood grain and evens out the tone a lot more. It's just been a happy accident that I've stumbled upon, and since you're using a water-based product first, you can use that oil-based product as soon as that water-based one has dried down. That deep, rich stain that I am using this time around is a dark walnut. Like I said before, this is oil-based, so the application is a little bit more forgiving. I have a little bit more time to work with rather than the water-based stain that dries down so quickly. However, even with that being said, I am going to apply it in smaller sections, each drawer face one at a time, and wipe it back right away. Again, everything goes in the same direction as the wood grain and everything gets wiped back very, very thoroughly. I don't want any streaks. I don't want any puddles. I want to make sure that I'm cleaning off all of the residual leftover oil stain that would be sitting on the top of these pieces. As a friendly reminder, if you're working with any sort of oil-based product, just lay out your rags from wiping it back. They just need to air dry on a flat surface. I've let this piece dry for at least 48 hours and I am coming back in with a water-based top coat, and I'm going to top coat all of the areas that I stained and really seal in that nice rich color. I am trying to avoid having a whole lot of overspray on the areas that I do plan on painting on the body of the dresser. So by using just a simple wooden guard along those edges, it really helps with the overspray not getting into areas that I don't necessarily want it to go. I'm going to apply at least 3 even coats of this water-based top coat. It is in a satin finish, so it's going to have a little bit of a sheen, a little bit of luster, and it's just a really, really pretty surface at the end. I find that it draws out some pretty depth in the wood tone. After a very light sanding with a very high grit sandpaper, think like 400 grit, I am going to go in with my second and third coats of top coat. With that top coat completely dry, I'm going to use a delicate painter's tape and tape off those surfaces so that when I go to paint the rest of the body of this dresser, I don't get any paint on the areas that I worked so hard to strip, sand, and stain. With painter's tape, if you run a damp towel over the edges that you don't want the paint to seep up under, it creates a little bit of a seal. I am priming with a clear shellac today. My client chose a really deep black to paint this piece. I'm going to use my favorite command line. I always like to seal with a clear when painting with black or dark color like that. I'm going to add a little bit of water to my paint just to make it a really nice consistency for my sprayer, and spray 3 coats of paint on the body of this dresser in all the areas that I did not sand and restain. This paint is really, really durable and dries really quickly, so I find that I can recoat in the same day. While that first coat is drying, I am going to address the hardware. I'm going to put it in a pot, add 50% cleaning vinegar with 50% water and boil it for roughly 20 minutes, making sure that my water level does not get too low. Once that's done, I am going to go in with a very fine grit steel wool and Barkeeper's Friend. These are a silver pole, they are not brass, but I still find that Barkeeper's Friend really does a good job polishing up all sorts of different finishes, not just brass. By the time I'm done polishing up that hardware, it's time to go back out and do a very, very light, gentle sand on the painted surface and apply my subsequent coats. With the paint still tacky, I am going to remove the plastic areas as well as the tape areas. This just helps to ensure that you're not going to pull any paint off from areas that you do not want to remove paint. After removing all that tape and plastic, I was really not happy with this edge. It is a solid core piece of wood with the pretty veneer over it, so that solid wood underneath is not the same species. I didn't like the way it took the stain, and it was easy enough to tape it back off and just paint those edges on the side. It still achieves a really clean, smooth look, in my opinion. Another area that I really did not like the way the stain was being taken was on the top edge of those drawers. So I am going to clean them very thoroughly and tape off those top edges. I'm going to spray a clear shellac as a primer and use the darkest, deepest brown that I have to just paint those top surfaces so that they better match the stained drawer fronts and look a little bit more cohesive. They were just looking a little messy to me. I really was not a fan of how that wood took the stain. After that's all done, it's time to install those original pulls back in place. And with that last drawer going back into its place, let's take a look back at what this piece looked like before I got started on it. This blonde finish definitely had a lot of wear to it. It was very dirty, very corroded in some areas. It was rubbing off, wearing off, and needed to be taken back completely. I know my client was so excited to see that final result. So without further ado, here is what it looks like in the end. It went from a really light blonde piece to a much deeper, richer, more elegant, dark stain with that black finish. I like how the original silver hardware really stands out and gets to shine against those darker, deeper, richer surfaces. I know this was a quality piece from working on the other set, so I knew it was most likely gonna have a really beautiful result at the end. I hoped you liked this video. Please feel free to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.